My name's Tyler, and I met Emily during my senior year of college. She was smart, driven, and beautiful, the kind of woman who made you believe in soulmates. We were inseparable from the moment we met. After graduation, we moved in together and built a life that felt solid, like we were invincible. Fast forward 5 years, and I was ready to propose. I planned the perfect weekend getaway in the Smoky Mountains, cabins, hiking, the whole Hallmark special. She said yes with tears in her eyes, and I thought I was the luckiest man alive. But 6 months before our wedding, something changed. Emily became distant, moody, cold, and defensive. She blamed stress from her new job at a PR firm where she worked under her boss, Chad, your typical smooth-talking executive. I didn't think much of it at first. Who doesn't stress over a demanding job? Then came the late nights, the emergency meetings, the weekends, catching up on work. I was supportive, trusting, stupidly naive. I had no reason to doubt her, or so I thought. The truth came out on a random Friday night when she stumbled in at 2 a.m., drunk and reeking of tequila. Her eyes were wild, her voice shaky. "I need to tell you something before the wedding," she slurred. My stomach twisted. "What is it, Em?" And that's when my world shattered. Emily swayed unsteadily, clutching the edge of the kitchen counter like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear her whispered words. "I slept with someone 6 months ago." The room tilted, my breath hitching in my chest. I stared at her, frozen, as if hearing it would make the truth vanish. "Who?" I managed to choke out. She blinked, her expression half apologetic, half defiant. "Chad, my boss." The name hit me like a brick to the face. Chad, the arrogant, perfectly groomed corporate shark I'd met at one of her work events. I could still see him smirking while shaking my hand, his eyes lingering on Emily like she was a prize he'd already claimed. "You slept with him?" My voice cracked with disbelief. "It was just once," she insisted, though her gaze darted away. "It didn't mean anything. It was a mistake." Mistake. That word echoed like a cruel joke. "A mistake," you confess in tears the next morning, not half a year later, just before pledging your life to someone. "How could you hide this from me?" My voice shook, anger seeping in. "I wanted to tell you, but I was scared. I didn't want to lose you." She stepped closer, eyes wide and watery, playing the regretful fiancé perfectly. "I love you, Tyler. It was the worst thing I've ever done." I stared at her, numb. This wasn't a drunken confession. It was damage control, timed just right. She wasn't sorry she did it. She was sorry I might find out. Her words hung in the air like poisonous smoke. "It was the worst thing I've ever done." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. The worst thing? No, Emily. The worst thing wasn't screwing Chad. The worst thing was lying to my face for 6 months while we planned our wedding. She flinched but quickly composed herself. "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you." I took a step closer, my voice dangerously low. "You lied every time you came home late and said you were working overtime. You lied when you looked me in the eyes and told me you loved me, like nothing happened." Her face crumpled, but it didn't soften me. I was beyond broken. I was furious. "You were going to marry me, while keeping this secret?" I hissed. "Were you planning to ever tell me? Or was this some twisted form of closure for you?" Emily's lip trembled. "I was terrified you'd leave. I couldn't bear losing you." "You already lost me," I spat. "You lost me the second you crawled into bed with him." She lunged forward, gripping my arms with desperate strength. "Please, Tyler, I love you. It meant nothing. It was just sex. I was drunk, stupid. It's you I want to be with." The word nothing pierced deeper than anything else. "Nothing?" I echoed, yanking my arms free. "It meant nothing, but you risked everything for it? You threw away us for nothing?" Her silence was deafening. She knew. There was no good answer. There never was. I turned away, needing air before I shattered completely. But as I reached for the front door, she blurted out, "It only happened because you weren't there." I froze. Slowly, I turned back, disbelief and disgust twisting my face. "What did you just say?" Her eyes widened, realizing her mistake. but it was too late. You weren't there for me, she repeated, more defiantly now. You were working long hours, always distracted. I felt alone. I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. So, it's my fault? I made you cheat? I'm not saying that. But you are, I interrupted. You're blaming me for your decision to sleep with your boss. She crumbled again, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, Tyler. But I was done listening. I walked out of the house, slamming the door behind me. The cool night air hit my face like a slap, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside me. My hands were trembling, fists clenched so tightly my knuckles turned white. She cheated. She lied. And now she wanted me to believe it was my fault? I paced up and down the driveway, my mind spiraling. The past 6 months suddenly made sense. Her mood swings, the constant tension, the defensiveness. She'd been carrying this secret like a ticking time bomb, knowing it would destroy us if it ever went off. And now, it had. After what felt like an eternity, I forced myself to go back inside. She was still in the living room, curled into a pathetic heap on the couch, her face streaked with tears. She looked up the second I walked in, hope flickering in her red-rimmed eyes. Tyler, she whispered, I love you. I'm so sorry. I stayed by the door, keeping my distance. Why now? I asked coldly. Why tell me tonight? She wiped her face with shaking hands. I couldn't marry you without being honest. I didn't want to build our life on a lie. I laughed darkly. You've already been living a lie, Emily. I thought, maybe if I told you, we could fix it, move past it. I stepped closer, my voice deadly calm. Were you still seeing him after it happened? Her eyes widened. No, it was one time. I swear. After that night, it was over. I studied her, searching for even a shred of truth. But how could I trust anything she said now? And he still works with you? I pressed. She hesitated, a split second too long. He left the company a few months ago, she admitted quietly. My chest tightened. Did you quit when it happened? Did you report him to HR? Or was it easier to keep seeing him at the office and pretend like it never happened? Her breath hitched. I couldn't quit. It's my career. I couldn't throw everything away because of one mistake. I stared at her, stunned by her selfishness. She couldn't throw away her career, but throwing away our relationship was somehow acceptable. You really don't get it, do you? I said, my voice hollow. You didn't come clean because you're sorry. You came clean because you were scared. She started crying again. Please, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll do anything. But it was too late. The damage was done. I couldn't stay in that room another second. Her sobs followed me as I walked away, hollow and desperate, but I was beyond caring. Every memory of us, every laugh, every touch, every whispered, I love you, felt poisoned. I ended up in the guest room, sitting on the edge of the bed like a man stranded on the edge of a cliff. My mind reeled, replaying every moment from the past 6 months in agonizing detail. How many times had I trusted her while she lied to my face? Our engagement, the ring I saved up for months to buy, the wedding plans we made together, choosing the venue, the flowers, the cake, all of it felt like a twisted joke now. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. For a second, I thought it might be her, texting some half-baked apology. But when I checked, it was a message from my best friend, Kevin. Hey bro, you good? Haven't heard from you. I stared at the screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I hadn't told anyone yet, couldn't even begin to explain. But something inside me cracked, and before I knew it, I was typing. She cheated on me. 3 dots appeared immediately. WTF? When? 6 months ago. With her boss. There was a long pause. Then, I'm coming over. I almost told him not to, but I couldn't be alone. Not after tonight. 15 minutes later, Kevin showed up, eyes burning with protective rage the second he saw my face. Tell me everything. So I did. Every ugly, humiliating detail. He sat there, fists clenched, growing angrier with every word. She told you now? Right before the wedding? What the hell was she thinking? She wasn't. I muttered. She just wanted to clear her conscience, make herself feel better. Kevin shook his head. You can't marry her, man. You know that, right? I swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing down on me. I don't know what to do. You do know. His voice was firm. She didn't just cheat, Tyler. She lied. She's only sorry because she got scared you'd find out. I rubbed my hands over my face, trying to block out the tidal wave of emotions crashing over me. Pain, betrayal, love, rage. You're right. My voice was hoarse. I can't. I won't marry her. Saying it out loud felt both liberating and soul-crushing. This was the woman I'd planned to spend my life with, and now I was ending it before it even began. The decision sat heavy in my chest, like a stone sinking into dark water. I couldn't marry Emily, not after what she did, not after what she hid. Kevin stayed with me that night, refusing to leave even when I insisted I was fine. He wasn't having it. I'm not letting you spiral alone, he said firmly. You need someone to keep you grounded. We crashed in the living room, him on the recliner and me on the couch. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, Emily and Chad, tangled together in some seedy hotel room or after hours at her office. My stomach twisted. At dawn, I heard movement in the kitchen. Emily. I could tell by the soft clinking of mugs and the faint scent of her favorite hazelnut coffee. For a moment, I almost forgot, almost believed it was just another ordinary morning. But it wasn't. Kevin stirred, blinking sleepily. Want me to deal with her? No, I sat up, muscles stiff from a restless night. This is my mess to clean up. He nodded but stayed close, ready to jump in if things got ugly. I walked into the kitchen. Emily was standing by the sink, staring blankly out the window, her fingers trembling around her coffee cup. Her eyes lit up with fragile hope when she saw me. Tyler, can we talk? Her voice was soft, almost timid, like she was afraid to shatter what little remained between us. I crossed my arms. Talk. She set her cup down, wringing her hands like a guilty child. I know you hate me, but I swear, it was one time, and it didn't mean anything. Stop. My voice was sharp, cutting through her excuses. I don't care if it was once or 100 times. You betrayed me, Emily. Tears welled up in her eyes. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking. You were sober enough to keep it a secret for 6 months, I snapped. You were sober enough to plan a wedding while lying to my face. I thought we could move past it, that I could make it right. I love you, Tyler. Her voice cracked on the last word. I shook my head slowly. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done it in the first place. She took a step closer, desperation etched into every line of her face. Please, we can fix this. Counseling, therapy, whatever it takes. I'll quit my job, No, my voice was steel. You made your choice the second you crawled into bed with him. Her breath hitched. You don't mean that. You're angry. You still love me. I clenched my jaw, forcing down the wave of conflicting emotions threatening to drown me. Did I still love her? Yes. But love couldn't survive this level of betrayal, not when trust was dead and buried. It's over, Emily. She gasped, as if I'd struck her. You're just going to throw everything away? After everything we've been through? I didn't throw anything away, I said coldly. You did. Her face crumpled, and she collapsed into a chair, sobbing. For a fleeting second, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the months of lies, the deceit, the betrayal. There was no coming back from this. I left Emily sobbing at the kitchen table and walked back into the living room, where Kevin was already on his feet. His expression was grim but supportive. How did it go? It's over, I said flatly, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Good. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing. Did I? It didn't feel like it. Ending it with her felt like ripping out a piece of my soul. But what choice did I have? Love can't survive where trust is dead. Kevin hung around for a while, making sure I ate something before finally heading out. Call me if you need anything. Seriously, I will. When he left, the house felt like a hollow shell, cold and quiet, haunted by memories of what could have been. Wedding plans, future dreams, us. All of it gone in the blink of an eye. I spent the rest of the day packing a small duffel bag. I couldn't stay in that house. Not with her still there, still pleading. I needed space, air, freedom from the suffocating weight of betrayal. Before I left, Emily appeared in the doorway, her face pale and tear-streaked. "You're leaving," she whispered. I nodded. "I need time to figure things out." She took a shaky breath. "I'll wait for you, no matter how long it takes." I didn't respond. What was the point? I wasn't coming back. As I drove away, I felt equal parts relief and devastation. The person I thought I'd spend forever with was now just a painful memory, a chapter one couldn't rewrite. I drove aimlessly for hours, the radio playing low, though I couldn't focus on anything but the crushing silence in my head. Eventually, I found myself parked outside Kevin's place, exhausted and numb. He opened the door before I could even knock, like he'd been expecting me. "No questions," he said firmly, stepping aside to let me in. I sank onto his worn leather couch as he grabbed a couple of beers from the fridge. He handed me one without a word, sitting across from me in quiet solidarity. For a long time, we just sat there, the only sound coming from the faint hum of the ceiling fan. "I don't know what to do now," I admitted finally, my voice rough from holding back everything threatening to break loose. "You breathe," he said simply, "one day at a time." I nodded, though it felt impossible. The life I'd built, the future I'd imagined, it was all gone. How do you start over when everything you believed in crumbles? Kevin gave me a place to crash that night and every night after for the next week. He didn't push, didn't pry, just let me exist without judgment. That space was the only reason I managed to stay sane. The message. One evening, as I was scrolling mindlessly through my phone, a notification popped up, a message from Emily. Against my better judgment, I opened it. "Emily, Tyler, I know you hate me, but please, can we talk? Just once? You need to hear the whole story." I stared at the message for what felt like forever, torn between rage and curiosity. What could she possibly say that I hadn't already heard? Lies? Excuses? More damage control? But before I could decide, another notification appeared. An email. This one froze me in place. Subject: important information regarding chat. The sender was anonymous. With shaking hands, I opened the email. Inside was a single line of text. "He's not who you think he is." Attached were several photos, grainy but unmistakable. Chad and Emily, together. Far too recently for her 6 months ago story to hold any weight. My blood turned ice cold. She's still lying. My hand trembled as I stared at the damning photos. They weren't old. The timestamps on the files were only a few weeks back, long after she claimed it had ended. Emily and Chad. Cozy dinners. A weekend cabin. Kissing like they didn't have a care in the world. The walls seemed to close in around me. She's still seeing him. I scrolled back to Emily's message. "You need to hear the whole story." The whole story? The real story was right in front of me. She hadn't confessed out of guilt. She'd confessed because she was caught in her own web of lies. Before I could process what to do next, my phone buzzed again. A call from a blocked number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello?" A deep, steady voice responded. "Is this Tyler Reynolds?" "Who's asking?" "This is Michael Carter. I'm Chad's wife. We need to talk." The call. I paced Kevin's small living room as Michael explained everything. His voice was controlled, almost too calm, but there was something raw beneath the surface. "Emily wasn't the first," he said flatly. "Chad's had affairs before, but this one was different. She's different." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "She wasn't just a fling to him." His voice wavered, bitterness seeping through. "He's been seeing her consistently. Business trips, late nights at the office. All lies. He told me he was leaving me for her." I sank onto the couch, my mind spinning. "Emily told me it ended months ago." Michael laughed bitterly. He said the same thing. They were still meeting up as recently as last week. I clenched my jaw, fury building with every word. How long had she been playing me? Feeding me fake apologies while sneaking off with Chad? Michael hesitated. "There's something else, something I thought you should know." I braced myself, dread twisting in my gut. What? He exhaled slowly, like he hated what he was about to say. Emily's pregnant. The word pregnant echoed in my head like a gunshot. No, that's not possible, I whispered, though even as I said it, I knew. Michael's voice remained steady. She told Chad last week. He thought she was leaving you. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred as reality twisted into something too horrifying to comprehend. Are you sure? I choked out. She left a voicemail, he said coldly. I'm happy to send you the recording. Before I could respond, an audio file popped up in my email labeled, For Tyler, the Truth. I stared at it, paralyzed. Did I even want to hear it? Yes, I rasped, more to myself than to him. Send it. Michael was silent for a moment before quietly adding, For what it's worth, I'm sorry. You deserved better. The line went dead. The voicemail. I sat frozen, my thumb hovering over the file. Every instinct told me not to listen, to delete it, burn my phone, and walk away. But I couldn't. Not after everything. I needed the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I pressed play. Hey, it's me. Emily's voice, soft and trembling. I'm late. I took the test, and it's positive. I clenched my jaw, my chest heaving. I don't know what this means for us, but I thought you should know. We need to talk. Please don't shut me out. The message ended, leaving a suffocating silence in its wake. A surge of fury overtook me. I grabbed my keys and stormed out of Kevin's apartment, deaf to his concerned shouts behind me. Emily was going to answer for this. No more lies, no more manipulations. I drove like a man possessed, heart pounding, mind consumed by betrayal. When I reached our house, her car was still in the driveway. Good. I threw the door open and found her sitting on the couch, her face lighting up with a twisted mix of hope and guilt when she saw me. Tyler, you came back? Who's the father? I demanded, voice cold and sharp as steel. Her smile faltered. What are you talking about? I took a menacing step forward, holding up my phone. I got a call from Chad's wife. I know. Don't you dare lie to me. Her face drained of color. I was going to tell you. When? After the baby was born? After I spent my life raising his kid? My voice cracked with rage and heartbreak. She broke down, sobbing hysterically. I don't know whose it is. It could be yours. I stared at her in stunned disbelief. You've got to be kidding me. It only happened twice, I swear, she wailed. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. You didn't know what to do? My voice thundered, raw with agony. You knew exactly what you were doing every time you snuck off to be with him. She collapsed onto the floor, clutching her stomach. Please, Tyler. I love you. We can still fix this? But there was nothing left to fix. I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. For good. I drove aimlessly, rage still boiling in my chest. My hands clenched around the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Every word Emily had said echoed in my mind. I don't know whose it is. The ultimate betrayal wasn't just the affair. It was the possibility that the child she carried could be Chad's. She'd ripped away every shred of stability, every future I thought I had. Eventually, I pulled into a deserted park and sat in the darkness, my breathing ragged. There was no escaping this nightmare, no waking up to find it was all some cruel trick. My phone buzzed. Kevin's name lit up the screen. Reluctantly, I answered. Where the hell are you? He demanded. I've been calling for hours. I told him everything, about the voicemail, the confrontation, and her pathetic excuses. He listened without interrupting, his silence heavier than any words. Finally, he spoke, his voice deadly calm. You cannot go back there. I'm not planning to. Good. He exhaled sharply. You need a lawyer. Fast. He was right. Emily was manipulative, and with a baby on the way, possibly mine, I couldn't risk her turning the legal system against me. The next morning, Kevin came with me to meet a divorce attorney named Rachel Hayes. She was sharp, confident, and didn't waste time sugarcoating anything. After hearing the whole sordid story, she leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. We have a few options, she said. First, You'll want to file for divorce immediately. We can also request a paternity test after the baby is born. What if it's not mine? I asked hoarsely. Then you're free of any legal responsibility, she explained. But if it is yours, things get complicated. The thought twisted my stomach. As much as I hated Emily, the idea of abandoning my own child was unbearable. What about custody? I asked. If the baby is yours, you can petition for joint or full custody, depending on the circumstances. Kevin chimed in. And what about Chad? Can he interfere legally? Rachel shook her head. If he's the biological father, he can pursue parental rights if he wants them. I clenched my fists. Of course, Chad would get a say in the life of my potential child. The man who destroyed my life could end up tied to me forever. Rachel's voice softened. I know this feels overwhelming, but you're doing the right thing by coming here early. I nodded stiffly. File the papers. By the end of the day, Emily was served with divorce papers. The fallout hit like a bomb going off. Friends, family, and co-workers quickly caught wind of the scandal. My phone exploded with calls and messages from mutual friends. Some were supportive, while others, her friends, accused me of being cruel for abandoning a pregnant woman. One particularly venomous message from her best friend, Melissa, read, "How could you do this while she's carrying your baby? You're a heartless bastard." I didn't respond. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. That night, Kevin and I sat on his back porch, sharing a stiff drink under the stars. She's already spinning the story, I muttered, painting me as the villain. Kevin snorted. Let her. Anyone who knows you won't believe her. But I wasn't so sure. In the court of public opinion, truth didn't matter. Perception did. As the night wore on, I made a silent vow. No matter how twisted things got, no matter how much she tried to manipulate the situation, I wouldn't let her destroy me. The next few days were pure chaos. Emily blew up my phone with frantic texts and voicemails, alternating between tearful apologies and venomous accusations. I love you. We can fix this. How could you serve me divorce papers while I'm pregnant? You're heartless. You're ruining my life, Tyler. Don't you dare abandon me. I blocked her number, but the messages kept coming. From new numbers, burner accounts, even mutual friends she roped into her web of lies. Every ping of my phone felt like a dagger to the chest. The worst came when her family got involved. Her mother, Cheryl, called me out of the blue, her voice dripping with judgment. How could you do this to Emily? She hissed. She's pregnant with your child, and you just walk away? What kind of man are you? I clenched my jaw, barely containing my fury. Did she tell you everything she did, Cheryl? Or just the parts that make her look like a victim? She made a mistake, Cheryl snapped. One mistake, Tyler. You're going to punish her forever? She's been sleeping with her boss for months. The baby might not even be mine. Cheryl fell silent, stunned by the truth she clearly hadn't been told. After a tense pause, she muttered, You're lying. I hung up before I could say something I'd regret. A week later, I was starting to piece my life back together, barely, when I got an unexpected call from Rachel, my lawyer. Her tone was urgent. Tyler, we've hit a complication. My heart sank. What kind of complication? Emily filed a paternity action against you. My stomach twisted. What does that mean? She's claiming you are the father and is requesting temporary spousal support and prenatal expenses. Rage boiled beneath my skin. She's trying to trap me. Rachel sighed. Legally, she can file based on the assumption that you're the biological father, given you were married, or close to married, when she got pregnant. Until there's a DNA test after the baby's birth, she can ask for support. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything, she was still manipulating the system, using the baby as leverage. What do we do? I asked, fists clenched. We fight it, Rachel said firmly. We'll request a court-ordered paternity test the moment the baby is born. Until then, we'll contest every claim she makes. I nodded, my mind racing. Emily wasn't just after reconciliation. She was playing the long game, using every legal trick in the book to keep me tethered to her. 2 days later, Rachel called again. The first hearing is scheduled for next month. She's pushing for an emergency support order. My stomach twisted. What's our defense? Rachel's voice hardened. We prove she's lying, and we fight like hell. I hung up, my mind spinning. The nightmare wasn't over. It was just getting started. The courtroom felt cold and sterile, its walls lined with cheap wood paneling that did nothing to soften the harsh reality of what was about to happen. I sat at the defendant's table with Rachel by my side, her sharp gaze locked on the opposing side. Across from me sat Emily, looking fragile and pale, her hands resting protectively over her stomach. It was a calculated performance, designed to tug at the judge's heartstrings. Next to her sat her attorney, a slick, sharp-dressed man oozing smug confidence. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. This wasn't about emotions, it was about facts. The judge, a stern woman in her early 60s, called the session to order. Emily's lawyer wasted no time launching into his carefully rehearsed plea. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "my client is pregnant and vulnerable. Despite her efforts to reconcile with her husband, he abandoned her in her time of need." Rachel shot me a quick warning glance, silently telling me to stay quiet. He continued, laying out a sob story about how Emily had no income, no support system, and mounting medical bills. "We request an emergency spousal support order to ensure her basic needs are met until the baby's birth." I felt like throwing up. Every word out of his mouth was a twisted half-truth designed to paint me as a cold-hearted monster. Then it was Rachel's turn. She rose gracefully, her voice sharp and precise. "Your Honor, we contest the claim that Mr. Reynolds is the biological father of this child. Given the timeline and credible evidence of infidelity, we believe there's a high probability that another man is the father." The judge arched an eyebrow. "You're asserting that paternity is uncertain?" "Yes, Your Honor," Rachel said firmly. "We request a court-ordered DNA test immediately upon the child's birth. Until paternity is proven, Mr. Reynolds cannot be legally obligated to provide support." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "Is there supporting evidence of infidelity?" Rachel handed over the incriminating photos, text messages, and the voicemail recording. Emily's face went pale as she realized exactly what we had. The courtroom fell deathly silent as the judge reviewed the evidence. Finally, she looked up, her expression unreadable. "Given the serious questions surrounding paternity, I will deny the emergency spousal support request at this time." Relief washed over me, though I knew this wasn't the end. However, the judge continued. "Once the child is born, a paternity test will be conducted. Should Mr. Reynolds be found to be the biological father, support obligations will be enforced retroactively." I swallowed hard. It wasn't a total victory, but it was a critical first step. As the hearing ended, Emily avoided my gaze, hurrying out with her lawyer. Rachel placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "That went better than expected," she said. "You bought yourself time." "Time for what?" I muttered bitterly. "She's just going to find another way to screw me." Rachel nodded grimly. "Maybe, but she's not as untouchable as she thinks." I didn't know what she meant, but I would soon enough. The weeks after the court hearing were tense, filled with endless anxiety and sleepless nights. Though we'd avoided the initial financial trap, the looming paternity test still hung over my head like a death sentence. Emily kept up her campaign of manipulation, playing the perfect victim online. Her social media accounts were flooded with tearful posts about how I'd abandoned her during her pregnancy, painting me as a heartless monster. Friends I hadn't heard from in years suddenly reached out, demanding to know how I could leave my pregnant wife. Others offered cautious support, sensing there was more to the story than she was letting on. But the worst part was the waiting. The months crawled by, each day bringing us closer to the baby's birth and the truth. One afternoon, Rachel called me unexpectedly, her tone brisk but energized. "We might have a game changer." "What do you mean?" I asked warily. I've been digging into Chad's background. Just hearing his name made my blood boil. "And he's not exactly the golden boy executive he pretends to be," she said. "Turns out he was quietly terminated from his last job after a sexual harassment scandal. 2 former female employees filed lawsuits, but they were settled out of court." I paced the room, heart pounding. "How does that help us?" Rachel's voice sharpened. "If Emily was another one of his workplace affairs, this could change everything. It shows a pattern of predatory behavior. My mind raced. If we could prove Chad had pressured Emily into the affair, or at least show that he had a history of targeting subordinates, it might blow her whole love story narrative apart. What do we do now? I asked. We subpoena his former employer and dig deeper into the settlements, she said. If there's anything useful, I'll find it. 2 weeks later, Rachel called again, this time with urgent news. Tyler, you're not going to believe this, she said breathlessly. Emily just filed a protective order against you. What? I exploded. On what grounds? She's claiming harassment and emotional distress. Says you've been stalking her and threatening her over the baby. I was too stunned to speak. This was a new low, even for her. Rachel's voice hardened. She's trying to build a case to block you from seeing the child if the baby turns out to be yours. Pure rage coursed through me. She was setting me up, using the legal system as a weapon. We'll fight this, Rachel promised. But you need to be careful. No contact with her, at all. Understood, I ground out, my teeth clenched. As I hung up, realization hit me like a freight train. Emily wasn't just playing dirty. She was all in. The protective order was Emily's boldest move yet, a legal grenade tossed into an already burning battlefield. If the court granted it, she could block me from seeing the child permanently if the paternity test proved I was the father. Rachel acted fast, filing an urgent response to contest the order. We also secured sworn affidavits from Kevin and 2 other friends, all of whom could testify that I hadn't contacted Emily since the initial court hearing. Still, the damage was done. The court scheduled a hearing for 2 weeks later, and I felt like I was drowning under the mounting legal pressure. 3 days before the hearing, Rachel called with fire in her voice. We have him. Who? I asked, heart pounding. Chad. Her tone dripped with satisfaction. Turns out one of the women from his harassment case agreed to testify, and she has receipts. What kind of receipts? Explicit emails, text messages, even recorded voicemails. He stalked her for months. We're filing a motion to include this in the protective order hearing. I was stunned. Will the court allow it? They have to, Rachel said. If Chad has a documented history of harassment, it shatters Emily's story. She can't claim she was some innocent victim of my abandonment if she's linked to a predator. The courtroom buzzed with tension on the morning of the hearing. Emily arrived with her lawyer, looking polished and confident. But there was a flicker of unease in her eyes when she saw Rachel's determined expression. The judge called the session to order, and Emily's lawyer launched into a dramatic opening argument. He painted me as an obsessive, angry ex-fiancé who couldn't accept the pregnancy and had been relentlessly harassing Emily ever since. My hands shook with suppressed rage as I watched Emily dab at her eyes with a tissue, playing the part of the wronged woman perfectly. Then it was Rachel's turn. Your Honor, she began smoothly, the real danger in this courtroom is not my client, but the man Emily has desperately been trying to protect, Chad Walker. The courtroom fell silent. Rachel didn't hold back. She presented Chad's disturbing history in excruciating detail, harassment complaints, settlements, and most damning of all, the explicit messages from one of his former victims. This isn't a man concerned with love or commitment, Rachel stated coldly. This is a serial predator, and my client has been dragged into his toxic web through no fault of his own. The judge's expression darkened as she examined the evidence. Emily's face went ghost white as her carefully crafted story unraveled. But Rachel wasn't done. In light of these new revelations, we formally request a criminal investigation into Chad Walker's misconduct and move to dismiss all claims of harassment against my client. Emily's lawyer spluttered, scrambling to object, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. I'll need time to review this evidence thoroughly, the judge announced. The request for a protective order is temporarily denied, pending further investigation. Relief surged through me, but I knew this was just the beginning. As we left the courtroom, Emily's desperate voice echoed behind me. Tyler, wait. But I didn't look back. I walked out of that courtroom feeling something I hadn't felt in months, hope. Rachel's takedown of Chad was surgical, precise, and absolutely devastating. For the first time, the playing field felt even, but I knew Emily wasn't done. She never quit, not when she was cornered. If anything, she was more dangerous now, with everything slipping out of her control. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a restricted number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "This is Tyler," I said warily. A familiar voice, cold and calculated, came through the line. "Tyler, it's Chad." My blood turned to ice. "What the hell do you want?" His chuckle was low and menacing. "We have unfinished business." I clenched the phone tighter. "You're about to be destroyed, Chad. Whatever you're planning, forget it." His tone darkened. "You think you've won? You don't know anything." Before I could respond, he hung up, leaving me gripping the phone in a white-knuckled rage. I rushed to Rachel's office, recounting the chilling call. She listened with a grim expression, tapping her pen against her legal pad. "We need to dig deeper," she said firmly. "Chad wouldn't risk contacting you unless he thought he had something." Her instincts were dead on. 2 days later, she called me, voice tense. "Tyler, I found out what Chad's been hiding, and it's bad." My stomach twisted. "What is it?" Rachel's voice shook slightly, something I'd never heard before. "Chad isn't just facing harassment claims. He's under federal fraud investigation." "Fraud? What does that have to do with me?" She hesitated. "He's been laundering money through shell companies, and Emily's name is all over the financial records." The room spun. "What?" "They set up a joint account last year, probably under the guise of business expenses. The authorities think she might be complicit." I could barely breathe. "You think she knew?" Rachel's voice hardened. "If she did, she's going down with him." Within 48 hours, Chad was arrested by federal agents on charges of money laundering, wire fraud, and tax evasion. The news exploded across every major outlet, branding him a corporate criminal. But the real shock came when Emily's arrest followed just a day later. The headline hit like a sledgehammer: "Corporate Scandal Unveiled. Pregnant PR Exec Linked to Massive Fraud Scheme." I couldn't process it. I thought she was just a liar and a cheater, but now she was a full-blown criminal. Rachel called soon after, sounding breathless. "Tyler, they're charging her with conspiracy. They think she knew what Chad was doing and helped cover it up." The pieces fell into place. Emily's desperate attempts to trap me legally, her manipulations, even the pregnancy. It all made sense. She hadn't just been protecting Chad. She'd been protecting herself. A week later, Rachel secured a court date to finalize my divorce, this time with no resistance from Emily's camp. With her facing multiple federal charges, she had nothing left to fight with. When the day came, I signed the papers with a shaking hand, watching the last chapter of our twisted saga finally close. "Congratulations," Rachel said softly when it was over. "You're free." But it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like survival. The divorce was final, but the emotional wreckage lingered like scars that refused to fade. Emily's arrest and Chad's public downfall dominated the news cycle for weeks. Headlines painted them as corporate criminals entangled in a twisted affair of greed, lies, and betrayal. I avoided the coverage as much as possible, but there was no escaping the headlines. PR power couple exposed in multimillion-dollar fraud scandal. Affair, deception, and federal charges. The rise and fall of Chad Walker and Emily Carter. 2 months later, I got a call from Rachel. Her voice was calm, steady, but I could hear the tension beneath the surface. "The baby's been born," she said quietly. My heart clenched. "And?" "We got the court-ordered DNA results." Time seemed to stretch painfully as I waited. "You're not the father, Tyler." The breath I'd been holding finally escaped. Relief and devastation hit me all at once. For months, I'd feared being legally tied to Emily forever. But now that the door was closed, all I could feel was emptiness. I never expected to see Emily again, but fate had other plans. One rainy afternoon, as I picked up coffee from a quiet downtown cafe, I saw her, sitting alone at a corner table, pale and thinner than I'd ever seen her. For a fleeting moment, our eyes met. Hers widened in shock before filling with something that looked like regret. She rose slowly, as if debating whether to approach, but I turned and walked away before she could say a word. Some ghosts are better left in the past. Life didn't magically return to normal after Emily. Trust wasn't something I could give easily anymore. But time has a way of dulling even the deepest wounds. Kevin stuck by me through it all, his loyalty unshakable. One day, you'll find someone worth trusting, he promised. Someone real. I wasn't sure I believed him until I met someone new, a woman named Lauren. She was kind, grounded, and refreshingly honest. No games, no lies. For the first time in a long time, I felt hope. Looking back, I see Emily not just as the woman who betrayed me, but as the lesson I never wanted, yet desperately needed. Sometimes, the people you trust the most are the ones capable of the deepest betrayals. And sometimes, surviving that betrayal is the only way to truly live again. If you're reading this and going through something similar, know that you're stronger than the lies, the pain, and the heartbreak. You can survive, even when it feels like the world is ending. And when you do, you'll realize it wasn't the end at all. It was just the beginning.